hours of February 2nd, 2012, Anchorage, Alaska, was quiet. Snow covered the sidewalks, and the air carried the kind of cold that keeps most people indoors. Streetlights reflected softly off the ice. It was an ordinary winter night, the kind where nothing unusual seems likely to happen. Samantha Koenig was working the closing shift alone at a small coffee stand on East Tudor Road. It wasn't unusual. She had done it before. The routine was familiar. A few last customers, cleaning up, locking the windows. She was supposed to go home that night. She never did. Security footage would later show a man approaching the coffee stand just before closing. He wasn't rushed. He didn't look frantic. He looked calm, controlled, like someone who knew exactly what he was there to do. Inside that small booth, with no one around to hear, he pulled out a gun. There was no chaotic struggle visible on camera, no loud alarm, just a quiet moment where one life crossed paths with someone who had been preparing for something like this for years. That man was Israel Keyes, and Samantha Koenig would not be his first victim. Before his name appeared in national headline, Israel Keyes lived what many would describe as an ordinary life. He was born on January 7th, 1978. He grew up in a strict, isolated household. His family moved frequent, living off the grid for periods of time. Formal schooling was inconsistent. Much of his childhood was spent in rural areas, away from typical social structures. People who knew him later described him as quiet, reserved, private. As an adult, he served in the U.S. Army. After his discharge, he settled in Anchorage, Alaska. He started a construction business. He had a long-term girlfriend. He helped raise her daughter. On the surface, there was nothing that immediately suggested violence. But beneath that surface, something else had been developing for years. Unlike many serial killers who escalate impulsively, Israel Keyes was methodical. He planned. He traveled frequently across the United States. Not for family, not for vacations, for opportunity. Investigators would later discover that Keyes buried what he called kill kits in remote areas years before using them. These kits contained weapons, cash, zip ties, and tools. He would fly to one state, rent a car, drive hundreds of miles, dig up a kit he had hidden long before, and look for a victim completely at random. He avoided choosing people connected to him. He avoided patterns. He wanted his crimes to look unrelated. He wanted them to feel untraceable. In June 2011, Bill and Lorraine Currier disappeared from their home in Essex, Vermont. There were no signs of forced entry, no immediate evidence of struggle. They were simply gone. Months later, after his arrest, Israel Keyes would confess to breaking into their home at night, abducting them, and killing them in an abandoned farmhouse. He had never met them before. He chose them because their home appeared vulnerable. To Keyes, randomness was protection. No connection meant fewer clues. By the time he abducted Samantha Koenig in 2012, Keyes had refined his system. After kidnapping her from the coffee stand, he took her to a shed near his home. Over the next hours, he committed acts that investigators would later describe in careful, restrained language in court. What made the case even more disturbing was what followed. Keyes left Alaska on a planned cruise with his girlfriend and her daughter. Before leaving, he had concealed Samantha's body. When he returned, he staged a ransom photo using her body to make it appear she was still alive. He demanded money from her family. He withdrew ransom cash in multiple states, attempting to create a confusing trail. He believed he had thought of everything. But small details matter in cases like this. The TM surveillance images captured his movements. His vehicle was identified in Texas weeks later. On March 13, 2012, Israel Keyes was pulled over by police in Lufkin, Texas. Inside his car were items linking him to the ransom demand. He was arrested. At first, he denied involvement. Then slowly, piece by piece, he began to talk. What investigators learned during interviews was chilling. Israel Keyes claimed he had been killing for years. He refused to give exact numbers. He described murders in multiple states: Alaska, Vermont, Washington, New York. He hinted there were more. He admitted to burying kill kits years in advance. He studied other serial killers. Not out of admiration, he said, but to avoid their mistakes. He believed he was smarter, more careful, more disciplined. But even careful plans leave cracks. DNA connected him to the Courier murders. Financial tracking connected him to Samantha Koenig's ransom. Travel records exposed patterns he thought were invisible. Investigators worked to confirm how many victims he truly had. The number remains uncertain. Some believe it could be 3, others suspect it may be more than 10. Keyes never gave a complete answer. In December 2012, while awaiting trial in Anchorage, Israel Keyes was found dead in his jail cell. He had taken his own life. He left behind drawings in his blood and a note that did not name victims, did not provide closure, and did not fully explain his motives. For investigators and families, it meant the full truth would never be known. No full accounting, no complete timeline, just fragments. The impact of the case extended far beyond Alaska. Law enforcement agencies across the country re-examined cold cases that matched Keyes' travel history. Families who had been waiting for answers wondered if their loved ones had crossed paths with him. His calculated randomness created a different kind of fear. Not targeted violence, not personal grudges, just opportunity. Unlike many serial killers driven by visible rage or chaotic escalation, Israel Keyes operated with restraint and long-term planning. He blended into ordinary life. He paid bills. He attended family gatherings. He volunteered. And then in the early hours of the morning, sometimes hundreds of miles away from home, he would become someone else entirely. That duality is what continues to unsettle people. Not just what he did, but how carefully he prepared to do it. For Samantha Koenig's family, the case is not about criminal profiling or investigative strategy. It is about a daughter who was 18 years old, a young woman who had plans for her future, a life interrupted in the final minutes of an ordinary shift at work. For the Courier family, it is about a couple who went to sleep in their own home and never woke up. Behind every calculated movement Israel Keyes made, there were real people whose lives ended without warning. The legal process never reached a full public trial. There was no verdict delivered in open court, no sentencing phase. His death closed the case legally, but it left many questions unanswered. How many victims were there? Were there more buried kids still undiscovered? Did he fully reveal the extent of what he had done? Those questions remain. When people think of serial killers, they often imagine chaos, impulse, visible warning signs. Israel Keyes disrupted that assumption. He showed that violence can sometimes hide behind routine, behind structure, behind someone who appears disciplined and ordinary, and that reality is what makes his case linger. Not just because of what is known, but because of what may never be fully known. If you're interested in real investigations, detailed case breakdowns, and the psychology behind serial offenders, subscribe and join us as we continue exploring cases that changed communities and the people